Tomoya was all of a sudden thrown into a blank, unknown space, and panic hit him. He looked around in confusion, unable to understand where he was. He steadied himself and remembered that his name was Tomoya Satoshima, just an ordinary salaryman. He remembered a huge truck slamming into him at an intersection and realized he should have died. But when he checked himself, his hands, feet, and even his suit were completely unharmed, which only made it more unsettling. He jolted at the impossible situation and questioned whether he had really died, then noticed someone standing beside him. In front of him stood a girl whose presence made her seem almost like a goddess. The girl politely asked if he was Mr. Tomoya Satoshima, and when he confirmed it, she abruptly dropped to the floor before him. Tomoya froze in alarm as the girl bowed down and desperately apologized. Still bowing low, she frantically said she was truly sorry, nervously fumbled for words, then all of a sudden asked if he was hungry while he tried to stop her and told her to wait. Tomoya cut off the apology and demanded a proper explanation first, and she cheerfully tried to ease the tension by asking him to come sit with her. As they sat at the table, Tomoya cautiously asked if she was a goddess, and she confirmed that she was one of the gods who governed this world, specifically the goddess of creation. She calmly revealed that Tomoya was already dead and explained that he had not actually been supposed to die yet because of a management mistake, adding that the god responsible had already been punished. She said she had first tried to return him to his old world, but once she understood the situation, she realized doing so could shatter the balance of the cosmic axis and trigger catastrophe. Tomoya stared down in silence, then asked if that meant he could not return to his original world, and she confirmed that he was right. That answer shattered his composure, and he shouted in disbelief that she expected him to just accept that. In panic, Tomoya grabbed at her and demanded to know how long he would have to wait before returning to his world, and she casually answered that it would only take 349.4 billion years. Tomoya was horrified and argued that such a number was basically forever, while she nervously tried to explain that time would pass faster now that he was dead, only making it sound even more ridiculous. Desperate, Tomoya yelled that she was the goddess of creation and insisted that she do something, and she hurriedly reassured him that she could help and told him not to worry. She finally revealed her solution and said the only option was for Tomoya to reincarnate in another world. The goddess explained that he would be sent to a fantasy world where people's abilities were managed through levels and statistics, adding that this was what modern culture called reincarnation. She warned that his old world would collapse if he forced his way back, then asked if he was really willing to destroy a world just to return, while offering instead to send him to a healthier world far removed from his own. She added that the New World's civilization was less advanced than Earth's, but she would make up for that by granting him many cheat-like skills so he would not die there, and she admitted she was thankful for that margin of safety. Tomoya forced a dry smile and objected that her idea of his old life being fine was not exactly accurate. He revealed that if the accident had never happened and he had stayed alive, he would have won a billion-yen lottery just 3 days later. The goddess made it even worse by saying he also would have broken the record by living to 150 and become the world's richest billionaire, which left him stunned and reeling. Realizing there was no path back, Tomoya reluctantly said he would have to accept reincarnation, and the goddess right away lit up and urged them to begin at once. Tomoya abruptly raised his hand and stopped her, demanding that she wait a moment. As she smiled eagerly, Tomoya noticed how strangely rushed she seemed to send him off and questioned why she wanted him reincarnated so quickly. With unease building, Tomoya stared at her and flatly said there was no way he could just accept this. Tomoya pressed harder and asked if she was hiding something from him, making her visibly tense. Flustered, the goddess dodged the question, acted like she did not understand, and even blurted out that his Japanese had become strange. Tomoya stepped closer and demanded to know what was going on, leaving her startled and nervous. Panicking, she muttered that there was just one more thing, and Tomoya right away locked on to that missing detail. As she bowed her head and apologized, Tomoya became sure she had been hiding something important. She explained that reincarnation into another world happened only once every thousands of years, and because people had forgotten it for more than half a century, the demon kings had repeatedly invaded and ravaged that world. Tomoya pieced it together and said that made her the god in charge of that world, and she confirmed he was right. She admitted that if a superior god like her interfered directly in that world, the cosmic balance would collapse. She cheerfully confessed that if she did nothing, the world would be destroyed, so she had planned to ask Tomoya for help, then added that he had never let her explain. Cornered by the sudden truth, Tomoya said he had little choice but to help, though he still looked completely overwhelmed. The goddess told Tomoya to kneel for a moment and said she would give him cheat skills first, and he awkwardly complied. Without warning, the moment turned deeply awkward as the goddess all of a sudden moved close, leaving Tomoya stunned and confused. Tomoya recoiled and demanded to know why her personality had changed so all of a sudden, while she casually remarked that the transfer was complete. Spreading her arms with excitement, she declared that just as promised, she had granted Tomoya cheat skills and raised him into one of the strongest people in that world. She proudly added that he had become absurdly powerful and could now save the world from the Demon King, while Tomoya reacted in disbelief. Then she abruptly asked a highly personal question, making the atmosphere instantly awkward as he tried to shut the subject down. Assuming from his reaction that he was uncomfortable, she teased him even more, and Tomoya right away denied it. Embarrassed and trying to move on, Tomoya asked if she had already finished granting the skills and told her to hurry and give him the necessary information, and she agreed. The goddess raised a finger and instructed Tomoya to say open status. Tomoya repeated the command, saying open status as he waited for something to happen. The goddess explained Tomoya's status screen, saying his life and magic were shown at the top. His magic power dropped when he used skills, his body was now normal and gained experience, and his combat power reflected his base strength with corrections, making his current values absurdly high. She went on to describe his blessing from the goddess of creation, saying he could increase appraised abilities, acquire skills and copy them, gain magic and copy magic, identify skills, and raise his own identifying power, while also noting that if his life fell below 30%, his strength would rise by 25%, and that identifying another person's skills would be especially useful. Tomoya said that with all that, his life in the new world should be fine, and the goddess agreed that this was the clearest explanation she could give. Tomoya dryly pointed out that her explanation only sounded disorganized, leaving the goddess speechless. The goddess brightly told him to get ready for reincarnation, and though still uneasy, Tomoya told her to go ahead. With a strained smile, she insisted there were no more secrets, which only made the moment feel more suspicious. She all of a sudden sent Tomoya away while casually wishing him good luck, and he right away shouted for her to wait. As he vanished, the goddess remembered too late that she had forgotten to tell him something important. Some hours later, the scene shifted to a quiet town. The calm shattered when a pig-faced attacker struck a man from behind, and the victim cried out for help in panic. The pig-like commander ordered his troops not to kill the woman and to take her to the square, while the captured girl desperately begged to be released. The armored orc identified himself as a general of the Demon King's army and answered that he would obey. The orcs reported that they had gathered all the women in the square, then asked if they were to kill everyone else and spare only the women. Lucia of the White Wolf race, shaken and on the ground, demanded to know why they were doing this. As violence exploded around her, Lucia bitterly reflected that she had been proud of her strong race, yet her mother had been killed with ease, leaving her wishing she had been stronger. One attacker threatened a terrified girl and said he would deal with her first, while she could only cry out for help as the moment turned deeply disturbing. Unable to endure it any longer, Lucia threw herself forward in a desperate charge. She struck the orc from behind, but he barely reacted and simply turned toward her as she cried out in panic. The orc right away knocked Lucia away with a brutal blow, sending her crashing to the ground as she screamed in pain. The orc coldly told her she was quick, but if she had really meant to kill him, she should have aimed for his neck. The orc noticed Lucia's white wolf traits and remarked that her kind was unusual. As rough hands seized her, Lucia panicked and demanded to be let go, but the attacker dismissed her resistance as noise. The tension makes the moment unsteady to stay in. While the other orcs cheered, their leader announced that this girl was his, and the rest were for his subordinates. A young man all of a sudden cut in, saying there was no time for that because he intended to kill every demon there. He burst forward in an instant and drove a crushing kick into the orc leader, sending the brute flying away. As the struck orc reeled in shock and coughed in pain, he demanded to know who this newcomer was. The young man calmly said everything was fine, and Lucia looked up at him in stunned disbelief. Placing himself between Lucia and the enemy, he told her that for now, she should consider him an ally. The shaken orcs demanded his name, and he answered coldly that names were meaningless for those about to die. The orcs rushed him from all sides and shouted for him to be killed, but he remained calm in the center of their charge. The effect of the spell pushes her past her limit. As he moved with overwhelming force, he quietly reflected that this really was another world, while the narration noted that a single casual hit had crushed the enemy. Standing over the fallen bodies, he realized he had just killed enemy orcs. One of the remaining orcs urgently warned the others to stay back and not attack him head-on. The orc leader told him not to get too full of himself just because he had killed a few soldiers. As the leader declared that he would finish the human himself, another orc anxiously wondered what this man's level was. The young man activated a search ability through his eye to assess the enemy. The scan revealed the enemy's combat power was 500, and he concluded that after hiding his own strength, that was the amount the orc could perceive. He explained that he had lowered the level others could see to avoid unnecessary trouble, while the orc dismissed his victories as mere luck and decided he could beat him. Confidently assessing the battle, he concluded it would be easy and activated battle support AI. He taunted the orcs, asking what they were waiting for and insulting them as pigs. The enraged orcs demanded to know what he had called them and shouted for him to be killed. He swung through them in a single sweeping motion, blasting multiple orcs away at once. A panicked orc right away ordered the others to attack him with magic instead. The enemy launched a barrage of spells at him, including Wind Cut, Thunder Spear, Ice Javelin, and Fire Spear. He remained calm as the blessing of the goddess of creation automatically acquired the incoming magic. The acquired magic was converted into new natural attributes, and he realized the number of magical attributes he could use had increased. Facing the remaining enemies with his back turned, he coldly answered with a simple remark as he prepared his next move. He unleashed Cyclonic Spin with a raised hand, and the violent force sent an orc screaming as it was hurled away. As magic tore across the battlefield, he calmly noted just how overwhelming superior-level magic truly was. A terrified orc reminded the others that his visible combat power had only been 500, while another shakily swore that was exactly what the scan had shown. Staring at him in disbelief, the armored orc demanded to know what his real combat power was, while the one behind him could only breathe sharply. The shaken orc broke into a cold sweat as he guessed a number around 2,000, then instantly recoiled from even that as impossible. While he cut through enemies, the orcs shouted over one another to report properly, and one finally admitted that his combat power was beyond anything they had imagined. He raised his hand and declared a staggering value of 220,000, bitterly mocking the absurd fantasy world that had dragged him there. An orc screamed that there was no mistake and confirmed his fighting power was truly 220,000 as the others around him were struck down. The nearby orcs could only stare in horror and repeat that a number like that was impossible. Walking forward through the fallen enemies, he answered that he had revealed his power for one reason alone, to make the enemy sink into despair. Faced with his overwhelming presence, the orcs trembled and concluded that a being like him was monstrous, and that matching his power was hopeless. The armored orc forced himself to stay composed and shouted for everyone not to panic. As the orcs raised a card and insisted they still had a trump card, he watched and realized they were preparing some kind of summoning spell. He wondered if he should stop it, but then judged it far inferior to the Imperial King of the Sacred Mountain they had defeated before and not worth fearing. Standing calmly, he noticed that the AI had hidden his true level again before the women around him could catch on, and he found that strangely impressive. The armored orc activated the spell and called for the darkness to bring forth a zombie dragon as the summoning began. A towering Cyclops zombie dragon appeared with a stated power of 6100, while the enemy boasted that he would be crushed and turned into the undead. He observed that the creature was a species that had gone extinct about 50 years earlier, and that becoming a zombie had made it stronger than an ordinary dragon. He stared in silence while the zombie dragon all of a sudden trembled and let out a confused growl instead of attacking. He realized the reason at once, explaining that his dragon influence gave him authority even over the summoner's command, which meant the effect worked on zombies too. As the terrified dragon sweated and hesitated, he coldly asked what it would do now and whether it intended to defy his order. Under his pressure, the zombie dragon broke into a nervous sweat and froze in place while the orcs behind it watched in rising confusion. The dragon all of a sudden panicked, roared that these were not its enemies, and called the summoner an idiot for forcing this madness. Looking almost casual, he listened as the dragon insisted it had only just awakened from a dream and wanted to go home. One orc stared in disbelief and asked what had happened, while the dragon kept growling and began opening a way out as if preparing to leave. Raising his hand, he calmly announced that now it was time to continue. As an orc desperately told him to wait, he turned back and coldly asked why he should. The girls rushed in and pleaded with him to let them finish the enemy themselves, saying they wanted to deliver the final blow too. He paused, said he understood, and then realized he had something useful in storage. The girls watched in surprise and asked if it was storage as a huge pile of weapons all of a sudden spilled onto the ground. He told them to choose whichever weapons they preferred, and warned them to be careful not to hurt themselves, and they quickly agreed. A sweating pig-like orc hurriedly apologized and begged for another chance as the pressure around him mounted. A girl stepped forward and cried out as the attack landed, ending the orc in a brutal instant. He calmly announced that it was her turn, and the girl right away agreed without hesitation. She accepted the offered weapon with gratitude after being told she could use that one. Lifting the blade overhead, she charged in and declared that she was doing it for her brother. Her strike crashed down, and the target screamed as the finishing blow connected. A burst shot up from the impact site, leaving the village square swallowed by smoke and debris. She apologized and said he should not have made her do that, while he admitted it would have been better if he had done it himself. He thanked her for saving the town and told her that without her, everyone would have died. Overcome with emotion, she bowed deeply and begged him to stay there for the night. He stared at the girl and realized she looked like someone who had died in a traffic accident long ago. He remarked that the two were very similar, and she nervously wondered if something was wrong with her face. She asked how they were alike, and he explained that she closely resembled someone he had once known. He then admitted sadly that the girl he remembered had already been gone for 10 years. As he turned away and said he should head to room, she stopped him at once while trying to process what she had just heard. She called out to Tomoya by name, leaving him stunned as he froze in place. In his mind, the memory of that girl surfaced, and he remembered that only one person had ever called him that way. The cat-eared girl looked up in shock and realized the person in his memory was Saiaka. She rushed forward and grabbed onto him while he turned back in disbelief and called her Saiaka. She told him that after her initial doubt, she was now sure he was Tomoya, while he stood shaken and wondered why Saiaka was here with animal-like ears. She pressed him about what he had forgotten about her, but he could only admit that the situation was too strange to process. She smiled through the shock and reasoned that it made sense because she had been reincarnated. He asked why she was here and whether she had died, and she answered that she was not completely sure, but thought that was likely. They both agreed to continue the conversation somewhere else for the moment. She stared at him and remarked that he had really grown up, saying he looked much bigger than the last time she saw him. He looked back at her and awkwardly noted that she had grown too. That comment left her frozen in surprise as the meaning settled in. She right away grew flustered, warned him not to make awkward comments like that, and angrily called him a pervert. He forced an uneasy smile while the atmosphere around him turned painfully awkward. After moving inside, she sat with him on the room and directly asked whether he was really Tomoya. Sitting beside him, she said he had barely changed at all, and admitted she had doubted him at first because he still looked so young, while he replied that 15 years had passed for him since then. Startled, she questioned how he could call her young after seeing her face, while insisting she was already 14 years old. She knelt in front of him and handed him a mirror so he could see for himself. Looking into the mirror, he realized he had become younger and more handsome, while she agreed that he did look younger and said she herself had not changed much, leaving him wondering if this was really his true appearance and not some kind of trick. As they faced each other across the room, he asked how she had ended up there and why she looked that way, especially with what he awkwardly called dog ears. She corrected him at once, saying they were wolf ears, not dog ears, and he quickly apologized before asking if she was some kind of beast man. She admitted she did not actually know how she had come there, only that the memories of her past life had all of a sudden returned. She explained that she did not know where her real parents were, but the family who found and adopted her when she was an orphan had become her true family in her heart. Smiling faintly, she explained that when she died in her previous life, she was reborn there with those memories inside the body of Lucia. He hesitated, then addressed her as Saya-san before correcting himself to Lucia, and she quietly confirmed that was right. Lucia smiled sadly and explained that the 3 people who took her in had been kind to her despite everything, and because they gave her a home she could call family, she had been content. He then asked what she was doing there, while thinking to himself that he had not wanted to drag her into all this but no longer had much choice. Startled by his words, Lucia could only ask what he meant as he told her this was his first day in this world. Sitting on the room, he repeated that this was truly his first day there, and Lucia was left struggling to process it. When she asked what he would do now, he said it felt like he had a purpose in that world, and that he planned to keep traveling until he fulfilled it. Lucia hesitated and then said she had something she wanted to ask him. She stood before him and urgently explained that the town could no longer support them, then pleaded for him to take them to the city because it was a month away on foot and the women could not make the journey alone. The scene shifted to rough men as the danger was explained. Beastmen were strong enough to handle ordinary monsters, but not thieves, making a safe trip to the city almost impossible. Their lack of food made the situation even worse. He understood as Lucia added that they would have to resort to hunting, but the forest was full of dangerous monsters. Lucia said she truly loved the town and everyone living there, and that was why she wanted to protect them all. Gathering her courage, Lucia asked him to help lead them to the city and said that if he saved them, she would offer him her support. She blurted out that she would devote herself to supporting him and even offer complete loyalty, leaving him stunned by how far she was willing to go. Flustered, he started to protest and called her Saya-san, while bitterly thinking he never expected things to turn out like this. Before he could finish, the moment all of a sudden turned deeply awkward and he was left frozen in shock. As the awkward moment continued, Lucia held tightly to him and called him Tomoya-san, while he could only react in confusion and embarrassment. Pulling back, she reminded him he still knew her as Saya-san, and explained that with her past life included, she was effectively 28 years old. The situation becomes uncomfortable. Seeing her on the verge of tears, he worried that rejecting her outright would be cruel and quietly asked whether Saya was truly sure about this. He realized that refusing her too harshly would bound her pride, while Lucia stood firm despite the tension. Tomoya realized he had to make a choice as Lucia stayed close and watched him anxiously. He said he would give her his answer, then all of a sudden moved in close and startled her. Tomoya told Saiaka that he was fine, but he could not accept her offer if it came from obligation, and admitted that he had already cared about her in their old world too. Brightening at once, Lucia eagerly asked him to accept her request, calling him Tomoya with hopeful excitement. She happily promised to do her best and claimed she knew everything about him because she had read his diary, leaving him stunned. Lucia kept cheerfully listing deeply private things she knew about his tastes and habits, and Tomoya recoiled in horror as he realized she had invaded his privacy. Still smiling, she insisted they understood each other well, while he could only stare at her and ask what she was even talking about. She declared that she wanted to stay by his side and support him, while Tomoya nervously thought the whole situation was becoming very strange. As he processed her bizarre devotion, he started suspecting that some hidden influence might be behind it. Staring in disbelief, Tomoya wondered if all of this was happening simply because she wanted to stay with him. Tomoya froze as a system message declared Lucia fully controlled, and under some strange effect, she obediently called him master, sending him spiraling as he wondered if one of his skills had done this. Lucia urged him onward, and Tomoya admitted to himself that he could no longer hold back his emotions. As he drew closer, Tomoya felt something hauntingly familiar in Lucia and realized it reminded him of Saiaka. A new passive special skill called Spiritual Link appeared, stating that completing Lucia's capture connected slave to master, doubled growth rates, and strengthened the blessing of the goddess of creation, while Tomoya stared in amazement as his power rose yet again. Even as the moment grew more personal, Tomoya questioned whether these feelings were only because of the ability, while Lucia shyly confessed how embarrassing it was. Under the moonlit sky, Tomoya later reflected that it had gone on through the entire night. The next morning, Tomoya sat up and admired the beautiful dawn, while awkwardly dwelling on his lack of experience and just how long the night had lasted. He concluded that he no longer had to worry about Lucia becoming pregnant, then noticed he had obtained a special skill called Empowering Seed, which raised the base values of slaves who received his power and included an auxiliary ability called Seed Absorption. Another status-like notice marked Lucia as Tomoya's property, and he learned that she had also gained a slavery skill, leaving him uneasily wondering if this was some bizarre taste of the goddess. Lucia looked overwhelmed afterward, and Tomoya could only remark that the previous night had been intense. Lucia rested quietly and admitted she had never imagined anything like this would happen. He reflected that after how disastrous his first stay in this world had been, there was no way he could ever forget it. A distant mountain towered above a sea of clouds as the scene shifted back to the beginning. Tomoya ran in panic across the wasteland while a dragon thundered after him and he screamed in terror. He cursed his situation and bitterly thought that starting a new life by being chased by a dragon was completely insane. The spell changes her condition in an unexpected way. Looking down after the fall, he saw blood and froze. The dragon loomed right in front of him with a menacing growl, and Tomoya could only stare in horror and think that he was finished. In disbelief, he thought this could not be real just as system messages announced that the goddess's gift had been installed and that information gathering for Master Tomoya would begin. More status windows flashed up, reporting an emergency state, activation of a defense system, mental state limiters, and a string of boosts to attack, strength, magic body, magical power, recovery, and auxiliary magic. Tomoya sat in stunned silence as another system notice declared that urgent magic had been installed and was being forcibly activated. With the dragon lunging at him, Tomoya instinctively shouted Flame Smash and tried to strike before it could devour him. A violent blast exploded in front of him and flooded the area with overwhelming force. As Tomoya braced himself against the ground, a system message announced that the defense system was compensating and would begin repelling the enemy. He threw a desperate punch and shouted for the blow to land, but the system reported no damage detected and continued compensating. Startled by a strange power gathering in his hand, Tomoya cried out Sword Aura as the system informed him that an instant duplicate attack skill had been installed. He was knocked off balance while the dragon roared behind him and the system forcibly activated its analysis function. In a panic, Tomoya swore he would run the monster through, while the analysis pinpointed a vulnerability on its body. He lunged with everything he had and drove straight into the dragon's weak point, tearing a cry of pain from the beast. Even then, the dragon bared its teeth as another notice coldly reported that the damage was still insufficient. Tomoya drove his attack into the dragon once more, as the system announced that his attack strength was being amplified. The dragon let out a strained cry and collapsed backward, its body going limp as the final impact overwhelmed it. Staring at the fallen monster, Tomoya wondered if it was really dead while the system confirmed that no enemy vital signs were detected. The curse makes her situation increasingly unstable. Still stunned and struggling to catch his breath, Tomoya received a system message informing him that he had acquired experience points. More notifications followed, stating that his experience had been doubled by the blessing of the Creator God, and that he had advanced to level 31. A flood of rewards came next, granting him new titles, increased attack and combat power, passive recovery abilities, and multiple skills gained through the Dragon Slayer title, leaving him overwhelmed. As he tried to process it all, Tomoya realized that without the mysterious voice, he almost certainly would have died. He then noticed that his wounds had already healed, and he could feel his body becoming stronger. Looking ahead in amazement, Tomoya concluded that this had to be the gift of a goddess, and he remembered the voice saying it came from the creator god. Tomoya froze as a voice answered him with calm confirmation, leaving him reeling over where it had come from. As he looked around from his crouch and demanded to know who had spoken, the voice politely introduced itself and addressed him as its master. The unseen speaker explained that it was a support system created through the gift of the creator god, and that its role was to make life in this world easier for him. Tomoya found the voice strangely artificial and wondered if it was some kind of artificial intelligence, and the system confirmed that it had no physical body and existed only as information and consciousness created by the goddess of creation. Accepting that much, Tomoya asked whether it had a name, but the system flatly replied that it did not. When Tomoya reacted in surprise, the system clarified that it had no formal designation. Tomoya remarked that calling it the goddess of creation's support system was too much of a mouthful, and the system told him he could give it a name if he wanted. Thinking it over, Tomoya considered calling it an AI support system as he searched for something easier. He then proposed the name Isis, explaining that it matched the feminine quality of the voice, and the system repeated the name as if testing it. The system accepted the name Isis from that moment on and thanked Master Tomoya, while Tomoya awkwardly brushed off the gratitude. Tomoya asked Isis how much she was really capable of if she had been able to help him back there, and Isis replied that the question was too broad to answer with a single conclusion. Isis explained that covering everything would take 88 hours and asked him to be more specific, which made Tomoya recoil as he admitted he could never remember all of that. Isis suggested that he should first understand his current situation, and Tomoya agreed that was the smarter approach. Tomoya then chose the most basic question and asked where exactly they were. Isis revealed that they were at the summit of Dragon Mountain in the Draggle Mountains, the largest range on the Castral continent and its coldest point, leaving Tomoya impressed by the dramatic name. As the image of a dragon-like creature filled his mind, Tomoya guessed that this place must be a level 1 dragon zone, but Isis corrected him and explained that the monsters here came from the Ryuhoho dungeon, which normally required at least level 99 to face. Isis added that this dungeon was considered one of the hardest in the world, with even groups of adventurers struggling to conquer it. She then stated that no adventurer had ever successfully cleared it, and Tomoya panicked as he wondered if the goddess had dropped him there just to get him killed. The goddess appeared in Tomoya's imagination as Isis dismissed that idea, saying it was more likely that the creator god had simply failed to consider certain factors because foresight was not her strong point. Isis continued by saying that although the goddess was powerful, she could also be foolish and needed to think more carefully, while Tomoya dryly remarked that the judgment sounded a little harsh. Tomoya apologized, but Isis sharply replied that even for a creator god, risking his life over such a small decision was outrageous, and he could only laugh awkwardly. Realizing their luck would not last forever, Tomoya said they should leave before more monsters appeared. Before they departed, Isis recommended that he collect the dragon he had defeated, and Tomoya activated a magic crystal installation skill to do it. Following Isis's instructions, Tomoya pointed at the dragon and used the generate command, and a bright effect began to form. When the result appeared as a crystal labeled as the defeated dragon's generated glass, Tomoya stared and wondered if the entire dragon had really been compressed into something that small. Isis explained that, in this world, defeated monsters were crystallized and then sold to create processed products. Holding the crystal, Tomoya called the system incredibly convenient, while Isis explained that powerful monsters became dense magic crystals used as materials for weapons, tools, and magic tools. Isis added that a demon's body could also be brought to the Adventurer's Guild, where it would be dismantled and turned into crafting materials. She further explained that even flesh that had been generated and crystallized could be restored again through regeneration, leaving Tomoya surprised that it was really that simple. After hearing that, Tomoya decided it would be easier to keep the dragon in crystal form so it would be easier to carry while traveling. Tomoya asked how long they would have to keep traveling on foot. He was stunned to learn that the nearest human settlement was estimated to be about 1,000 kilometers to the south, and he blurted out that there was no way he could make that journey. Before he could even process it, a warning announced that multiple hostile individuals were approaching, no escape route had been found, and an emergency state had been activated. As Tomoya looked around, the system began identifying the hostile creatures surrounding him. Several dragons were revealed at once, including a great bull dragon, a dragon soldier, a big rogue dragon, and a far more dangerous Dragon Kaiser Sapphire whose combat strength dwarfed the others. Then an even greater monster appeared as a sacred dragon emperor, and its overwhelming combat strength made the danger spike instantly. Even after assessing his condition and noting that he had chills, the system questioned why he still was not afraid. Tomoya realized at a glance that this one was far stronger than all the other enemies. Even so, he clenched his hand and admitted to himself that there was no way he could win. Despite that conclusion, Tomoya stepped forward to face the dragon and resolved that he would not let it reach him. Tomoya was all of a sudden thrown off balance as the battle ended around him, and the enormous dragons crashed down nearby. The system confirmed that the enemy vital signs had vanished and the emergency state was lifted, while Tomoya, still dazed, insisted that he had said he would win, unaware of the hidden blessing behind it. A title skill called Star of the Story was revealed, and its passive effect massively increased his hidden luck. Tomoya learned that the blessing of the god of creation had multiplied his earned experience fivefold, raising his level to 11. The system then informed him that he had acquired many new skills and titles, with the details stored in the register. Tomoya wondered whether this new strength was enough, and the system answered that defeating the Sacred Dragon Emperor had greatly increased his combat power. Even so, he dropped down in relief and admitted that more than anything, he was just glad he had survived. As dragon corpses lay around him, the system recommended that Tomoya collect them all. Startled by that suggestion, Tomoya asked if he could not just leave them behind, but the system warned that would be unwise. The system explained that if a dragon body was left without being crystallized, it could revive as undead, and such undead creatures were usually even more aggressive than in life, leaving Tomoya horrified at the thought of an undead dragon emperor. The system told Tomoya not to worry because his level was already high enough to defeat a dragon emperor, though it added that there were still some spiritual matters to consider. As Tomoya prepared to move on, the system explained that time stopped inside Lys's storage, so even corpses would not spoil once placed there, and time could also be adjusted freely. After a search around Froya, an ancient ruin was discovered, and it was recommended because of a slight magical power reaction. Arriving at the ruin, Tomoya looked around the columns and asked if this was the place. Inside, he found a dragon sculpture, and he noted that it resembled some of the dragons they had fought. Tomoya all of a sudden heard gratitude directed at him as someone thanked him, leaving him startled. The voice told him not to fear, explaining that it was speaking through the effigy he had addressed, which made Tomoya turn in shock. The speaker revealed that it seemed to be the Emperor of the Sacred Mountain, who had fought the demon army some time ago, only for demons to appear a few days earlier and kill his companions. It was then explained that this was where the slaughter had begun, and that the dragon had eaten them all, leaving behind a curse that now covered the entire mountain. The voice thanked Tomoya for allowing them the pride of dying in battle, and said the Emerald Dragon Kaiser and the Sapphire Dragon Kaiser Tomoya had defeated were no exception. They decided to remove the dragon jewels from the two dragons and the Holy Emperor, and Tomoya was told that inheriting them would grant immense power, authority over dragons, and even flight. Even after being thanked again and urged to accept a reward, Tomoya hurriedly tried to refuse, insisting he did not need anything. But the dragon spirit would not accept that modesty and pressed him to take this temple's treasures for saving them, saying that, as the head of that family and a father to many children, it could do no less, leaving Tomoya no choice but to reluctantly agree. The dragon then said its time there was nearly over and asked for Tomoya's name before it vanished. Tomoya politely introduced himself and said it was nice to meet the dragon. The dragon repeated Tomoya's name with clear approval, called it a fine name, and then bid him farewell as its presence slowly faded away. As he searched the temple, Tomoya discovered a stockpile of weapons and tools gathered around an ornate chest. Peering inside, Tomoya picked up a long blade and wondered what in the world he was looking at. He then learned the weapon was called Heaven, a blade said to cut everything by cutting nothing, excluding all emptiness and none, leaving him utterly baffled. When more details surfaced, Tomoya was stunned to learn it was a relic-class weapon of the indestructible gods, a sword that ignored armor and magic resistance and could grow stronger without limit, making it feel less like a weapon and more like a threat. When Tomoya examined another shining treasure, he muttered that surely nothing could be stranger than that absurd sword. The analysis identified it as an apex jewel, a fusion of the wisdom of an ancient people and the Balaz forged through divine power, and Tomoya instantly regretted saying that. He then learned that absorbing the jewel had granted him several new skills and titles, leaving him frozen in disbelief. A prompt told him to check below for more details, and he stared ahead with growing dread. As he read the list, Tomoya was horrified to find a bizarre skill implying that someone devoted to him could never leave, and he demanded to know what that was even supposed to mean. Before he could process anymore, he all of a sudden shot forward through the air at terrifying speed. As he flew, Tomoya admitted he had no idea what he would do without Isis, while the support system calmly addressed him as master. Then Isis abruptly warned him to proceed with caution, and Tomoya instantly demanded to know why. Isis reported that in the next town, numerous vital signs were vanishing one after another, making Tomoya fear the people there were under attack. The system concluded that, based on the numbers, it was most likely an invasion force, and that demons were apparently killing humans and beasts throughout the area. The moment Isis reported the crisis, Tomoya said they could not ignore it and ordered an immediate change of route so they could save the people there. He remembered that this was how he had first ended up in that town, waking there after everything that had happened. Lucia remembered the fury she had felt when she realized the goddess was involved, and she swore she would confront her the next time they met. Even so, Tomoya reflected that despite how terrible that day had been, he was still glad he had been able to protect Saiaka. Sensing movement behind him, Tomoya turned and apologized, asking if he had woken her. The next moment turned awkward as Lucia greeted him with obvious warmth. Lucia then smiled and wished her master a good morning, while the narration noted that somehow, everything had worked out in the end. A few days after the dragon attack, the group set out by wagon and decided to head for the city. Along the way, they carefully divided up the materials they had recovered, including the dragon meat. While taking the night watch beside the campfire, Tomoya said he had volunteered because his cheat abilities made sleep unnecessary. Misha thanked Tomoya again for saving her and helping them, then admitted she had been lonely, but felt less alone now because this girl would keep her company, while Tomoya brushed it off as nothing special. Around the campfire, Lucia hesitated and told Tomoya that what he was thinking about was wrong. Lucia nervously pointed out that Misha was already 18 years old, leaving Tomoya reeling from the misunderstanding. Misha happily insisted that both of them had helped against the demons, and were important to everyone no matter their age. As the misunderstanding spiraled further, Tomoya awkwardly tried to explain himself, and Lucia flatly said he could not seriously be considering it. Tomoya right away denied it and made clear he had no intention of doing anything improper, while Misha innocently wondered what the adults were even talking about. Once the confusion finally settled, Lucia all of a sudden asked Tomoya to train her, and he questioned where that had come from. Lucia explained that if Tomoya had not appeared when he did, none of them would have survived, and she wanted the strength to protect the people she cared about. She declared that she wanted the power to fight for those she loved. Lucia stepped closer and earnestly asked Tomoya to help her, and he agreed. Tomoya said it would not count as betrayal in this situation, and explained that training day and night could help Lucia grow stronger, while his reinforcement skill could also raise her physical ability. As Tomoya moved in to train her directly, Lucia flushed and nervously warned him to keep quiet so they would not wake everyone, and he replied that he simply had to do it properly. While Lucia struggled through the grueling training, Tomoya told her that the more she resisted, the louder it would get. Overwhelmed and embarrassed, Lucia begged him to finish quickly, and Tomoya answered that he would use his final move. The narration explained that they repeated this training almost every night, and Lucia's power kept steadily growing because of it. A few days later, Tomoya said they were getting close and should reach Amud soon, and Lucia quietly agreed at his side. Then Tomoya all of a sudden received an alert that several hostile vital signs were approaching and that an attack was highly likely. Checking the situation, Tomoya realized they had finally been found, and learned that the enemy force consisted of 15 humans and 22 beastmen. When Lucia asked what was wrong, Tomoya hushed her and strained to listen to the approaching danger. Tomoya quickly warned the group to stay calm because many enemies were nearby, but assured them they were not surrounded and would not be tracked. The bandits emerged from the darkness, delighted to find such an easy target and mocking the camp as a perfect haul. Tomoya calmly told the intruders to leave. One of the men acted offended and sarcastically asked whether Tomoya was seriously ordering them to back off. As the raiders declared they would take the villagers, then the women, and then their lives, Tomoya decided he might as well end it right there. Lucia stepped forward and called out to Tomoya, stopping him cold. Lucia asked Tomoya to leave these enemies to her. Tomoya agreed, saying that if she was sure, he would stay nearby in case she needed help. The bandits burst into laughter, mocking the idea of sending someone so young against them and calling the decision insane. Before the taunts could continue, Lucia cut one of them off and coldly told him to be quiet. Under the moonlight, Lucia advanced with her sword drawn while the men hesitated before her, and the tension before the fight turned razor sharp. Lucia fixed the bandits with a freezing stare and told them to prepare themselves. The bandit leader was rattled by what he had just seen, then forced himself to stay composed as he warned his men not to fear one girl because they still had the numbers. As Lucia cut through the attackers with ease, the men panicked and could only curse while wondering how this was even possible. The bandit leader stared in disbelief and realized that a seemingly slight girl was wiping out his men without the slightest effort. Lucia moved with absolute confidence, while the bandit leader reeled in shock and wondered why someone this dangerous was traveling with what he had assumed was only a refugee caravan. Realizing they were hopelessly outmatched, the bandit leader shouted for his men to retreat at once, urging them to survive and fight another day. Lucia happily leaned against Tomoya and praised the battle, then said she had grown stronger thanks to him. A girl from the group stared at Lucia in amazement and asked when she had become so strong. Lucia proudly declared that it was all thanks to Tomoya's training. After all that trouble, the group finally arrived safely at the town of Amud. A worried woman thanked the heavens that Saiaka was safe, while Tomoya identified her as Lutar Banan Amrud, the city chief's son, with modest combat ability. Lucia politely thanked Lutar for his concern as the two faced each other inside the city. Lucia asked if he could let go after clinging to her, and Lutar awkwardly apologized as he pulled back. Lutar and an older man explained that everyone had been deeply worried when they heard about the attack. The older man, revealed as Gormanborg Amrud, chief of the city of Amrud, said it was a relief that so many had escaped, while Tomoya noted that Amrud served as the Adventurers Guild headquarters near the frontier, and that the ruling family both governed and protected the city. A cheerful group of women welcomed them warmly and assured them that they would be protected under his authority. Gorman told Tomoya that no good deed should go unrewarded, and invited him to stay the night and enjoy the city's hospitality, which Tomoya accepted. Later that night, Tomoya all of a sudden sat up on the room in silence, while Lucia rested behind him and the air grew tense. Tomoya remained quiet and uneasy, and when Lucia asked what was wrong, he admitted that something about the situation felt off. Tomoya said it would be nice to settle down there, but he still needed to prepare for the future, leaving Lucia puzzled by his determination. Tomoya warned that this was only the beginning, and that something even worse was still coming. Tomoya said he planned to join the Adventurers Guild because traveling would become easier, and Lucia stared at him in shock as she asked where he intended to go. Tomoya admitted that he could not stay there forever, though he wanted to take Lucia with him and believed it would still be better for her to remain behind. Lucia angrily rejected that idea and asked how he could say that after promising they would never be separated again, while Tomoya insisted she was already strong enough. Tomoya reminded her that she had called the villagers her family, and Lucia argued that she could not abandon them. Lucia said that if the situation was truly as serious as he claimed, then she wanted to help in any way she could. Lucia firmly told him that even as his servant, she could not simply accept being ordered to stay behind, and Tomoya reacted in surprise as she invoked Sayaka's feelings. As the room shifted and the atmosphere grew awkward, she admitted that she cared about him too much to stay silent. Tomoya relented and invited her to travel the world with him, and Lucia happily accepted his decision like a command from her master. The next morning began quietly with the simple sound of breakfast being prepared. At breakfast, Lucia noticed Tomoya looking troubled and asked what was wrong, while he could only hesitate and admit he was thinking. Tomoya reviewed the effects of a divine blessing and noted that it granted overwhelming resistance, including immunity to many conditions and even resistance to poison. He examined a powerful laxative and realized that for an ordinary person, taking it could cause days of severe illness and possibly death from dehydration, leaving him disgusted by how ruthless it was. A man nearby wore a strained smile and concluded that someone must have slipped turtle tooth or some other brutal ingredient into the food. Tomoya reasoned that Lutar had probably spent the previous night suffering from a violent stomach disaster, and he suspected the man was trying to remove him from Sayaka's side because of an obvious crush. As Tomoya left with Lucia, he dryly thanked Lutar for the breakfast, called Lucia by Sayaka's name, and headed for the guild, while Lucia followed at once and Lutar was left behind as Tomoya mentally dismissed him as never having been a real rival. Walking through the city with Lucia, Tomoya said they should handle the basics first by registering as adventurers. At the Adventurers Guild, a receptionist welcomed them and politely asked how she could help. Tomoya stated that he and his partner wanted to register as adventurers, and the receptionist right away acknowledged the request. The receptionist then instructed Tomoya to place his hand on a crystal to begin the process. The receptionist confirmed Tomoya had no criminal record and said the registration could proceed, leaving him mildly surprised by how easily it had passed. She explained that the crystal could read a person's biometric data. She added that the system existed to stop criminals from registering, while assuring them that beyond that check, it would not intrude on their privacy at all. Before continuing the assessment, the receptionist said she would first explain how adventurer ranks worked. She outlined the guild hierarchy from E rank to S rank, explaining that E rank handled simple jobs, D rank dealt with low-level threats, C rank covered ordinary monster work, B rank demanded stronger combat ability, A rank was reserved for elite adventurers, and S rank belonged only to those whose power stood far above the rest. She further explained that applicants could take a special test to start at C rank, or even begin at A rank if their abilities warranted it, and that the evaluation judged not just combat strength but leadership and information gathering as well. After hearing the explanation, Tomoya said he understood, though the large man nearby offered to explain it again if necessary. When Tomoya casually let an intense presence slip out, the large man went rigid and could only stare in disbelief. The shaken man right away called out to Tomoya, and Tomoya turned back with plain confusion. Sweating under the tension, the man asked if that overwhelming presence really belonged to a new adventurer, while his displayed status identified him as Avon, a level 89 Saichi group fighter with a total force of 5399 and an S range evaluation. The receptionist confirmed to Mr. Avon that the two before him were indeed new recruits, and Avon acknowledged it at once. Avon apologized and asked the pair to come with him. In a more formal room, a maid served Tomoya tea and quietly told him it was ready. Avon said he wanted to skip the pleasantries and ask directly about Tomoya's abilities, admitting that even if Tomoya was far stronger than him, his own power reading skill was too unreliable to measure him properly. He added that the concern was understandable, but asked whether Tomoya could at least perceive an opponent's true combat power with his ability, even if he did not know the exact mechanism behind it. Tomoya thought to himself that he wanted to stay unnoticed, and that because of his title's effect he had been suppressing his combat power, lowering it from 220,000 to 550. Caught off guard, Tomoya wondered how Avon had noticed the deception and whether other methods existed to judge someone's strength at a glance, while Avon admitted he was curious how someone so young could wield such power. Avon said Tomoya would likely never reveal the answer, but noted that the very effort to conceal it proved he was protecting something important. Tomoya replied that under normal circumstances, Avon would be correct, and said that if that were the case, there would be no way to know whether the display power was genuine. Avon then revealed that in his own case, he could accurately discern a person's true power. Avon used Lucia as an example and said that even an A-rank fighter would not be able to harm the she-wolf, noting that her visible strength was 490. He then added that the same kind of hidden depth existed in Tomoya as well. Sweating under the pressure, Avon admitted honestly that he did not even know whether what he saw was Tomoya's full strength. He said that he had been an adventurer for over 100 years, and still had never encountered anyone like Tomoya. Avon continued that in terms of total combat power, the gulf between them was so absurd it surpassed anything he could have imagined. He confessed that when he first saw Tomoya, it felt as though the Demon King himself were standing before him, leaving Tomoya stunned by the comparison. Tomoya questioned whether Avon was overstating it, but Avon answered that he had faced that enemy himself during the war years ago. Hearing that, Tomoya inwardly rejected the comparison and wondered whether the Demon King might somehow possess abilities similar to his own. After considering it further, Avon clarified that despite the resemblance, Tomoya was unquestionably far kinder than the Demon King. Lowering his gaze, Avon said he had not mentioned it yet, but if Tomoya accepted the job, the reward would be immense. Avon said he would pay 100 gold coins up front, whether the mission succeeded or failed. He added that Tomoya would also receive the finest accommodation in town for the duration of the job. Pointing to the room beside the chest overflowing with coins, Avon promised another 1,000 gold if Tomoya succeeded and said he would also have him start at B rank. He further offered a special guild letter that would grant free entry to any city on the continent, leaving Tomoya surprised by just how much was on the table. Tomoya asked what the catch was, and Avon made it clear this was no task for an ordinary person. When Tomoya asked whether another S-rank adventurer could handle it, Avon explained that he had no way to reach them because S-rank adventurers roamed all over the world. Avon concluded that this made Tomoya his only option, while Tomoya weighed whether he should accept the request. Tomoya agreed to the deal, and Avon thanked him right away, relief written all over his face. Before moving on, Avon said there were some people he wanted Tomoya to meet. A maid entered with a polite bow and quietly welcomed him inside. Tomoya froze as a young woman appeared before him, and the sight left him silently wondering who she was.